Ethics Board to order. We do have a quorum present. We've got Supervisor Luck online, and then we've got Supervisor Severson and Cosgrove and myself here in the county boardroom. So we can proceed with business. Agenda item number 2, proof of notification. Mr. Langreck, was there, did that get posted on the county, the bulletin board downstairs? It did. Okay, thank you. So it was properly notified. Agenda item number 3, agenda approval. We have an 11-point agenda.
Second.
Motion by Cosgrove, second by Severson. All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. We have an agenda. Agenda item number 4, previous meeting minutes. So I'm looking for a motion to approve those. Okay, what was the error? Okay. Okay, glad we weren't here till 11 something p.m. last month. That's great. Okay, so looking for approval. Okay, motion by Severson.
Second.
Second by Cosgrove. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Those minutes are approved. Agenda item number 5, county board meeting date change. So with the economic development agreement coming up at both the city council and the county board on January 18th, Joanne Krulotz, who I believe is on the line today, had mentioned this to me in the past, and I know I've heard other people mentioning we have a conflict with our regular city council meeting at the city, so that's why this is on here. So I'm making a recommendation to you all today to take a resolution to the county board to change that meeting date from the 3rd Tuesday to the 3rd Thursday of most months. So the way I came up with this date, and maybe we will change it here today, but I'm just pitching something for everyone to react to, is that, okay, so Joanne Krulotz, she told me that the Richland Center School Board meets on the 3rd Monday of each month. I looked up the Riverdale School Board since Supervisor Cooey's on that. That's the 2nd Monday of each month. And then yesterday I was talking to him after another committee meeting. He said that he's also the chair of the Oriontown Board, and they meet on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. So that wouldn't be good either. I talked to Mr. Langreck about it. We were more just thinking, he suggested we avoid Wednesday night for people who have religious related conflicts on Wednesday evenings. So that's how we came up with the 3rd. That's how I came up with the 3rd Thursday to pitch to you all. Now there are a few exceptions to it. One is that state statute requires the county board to hold an organizational meeting on the 3rd Tuesday of each April. So we'd have to keep that one the same. And then there are 2 other things in our county board rules. One is about the annual meeting shall be held the last Tuesday of October, and the December meeting shall be held on the 2nd Tuesday of the month. So I've got a draft here on page 2 of county board rule number 1 is what this is. And in the 2nd paragraph of that, it'd be striking the word Tuesday, replacing it with Thursday. And then the language about the organizational meeting isn't in our county board rules right now. So I thought just to clarify, we should put that in there that it shall be held the 3rd Tuesday of April because of that state statute. So any discussion on this?
Mr. Chair, I did have one, I had a comment. This is Administrator Langrick. I did have a feedback from this since it has been posted, brought forward from staff that there is another religious practice in the community that does observance and does religious practice on a Thursday night as well. I know part of my reasoning in our discussion was on Wednesday night was on that. So just an observance that there are other religious practices that might be practicing on other days of the week.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm not in favor of moving it. City council meets first Tuesday of the month and the 3rd Tuesday of the month. They meet twice a month. We only meet once a month. I think if they're wanting to join this meeting, come to county board meetings, that they should move their meeting or make time out of their time. Because when the mayor, when he was an alder person. He actually took time out of his day to come up here, spoke what he needed to speak and left. And I think John Collins did the same thing too, Alderperson Collins. I don't think that we need to adapt to them. I know that when we want to try to get anything done with the county here, it's always a 3-month to 4-month process. By the time you even think of the idea, by the time it goes to committee, then by the time it gets hashed out again and then goes to county board for it to be enacted. I think that economic development and Simon should do a little bit more, I don't know what I would say. It's like maybe thinking or pre-planning ahead and know that, hey, if I have county board's meeting on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, maybe I need to do my presentation on the 1st Tuesday of the month for city council. So then they have an opportunity to do that. And then I think that if they are concerning with economic development and Simons, that we have the city ad hoc committee that does meet, that Melissa's going to talk about a little bit later, that's in our thing, that maybe if there is stuff like that happens, maybe the city ad hoc committee meets beforehand and we get stuff hashed out before it gets presented to both the board and stuff. I think we're fine at where we're at right now. People want it to change. I think the city should be the one that's changing it.
Okay. Good to know all that. Yeah, appreciate you sharing all that. Other committee members?
I particularly agree with Gary. This has been a long-standing time set for the county board. The fact that they meet twice a month versus once a month, I think there could be some rearranging on their behalf.
And I mean, Mr. Chair, I've never really, Todd and other person, or Mayor Coppernall and Mr. Collins were the only people that I've ever seen at a county board meeting from the city council. We did back when you first joined the board back in 2017, I think it was, or 18, that we changed the time from 10 a.m. on the winter months to 7 p.m. because there'd be more attendance. And I really haven't seen any more attendance coming to those meetings. Only when there's a hot button issue is there ever attendance at these meetings. So I think we just keep it the same right now. I don't see any pressing. And if city council wants to change their meeting date, then they could change theirs if they wanted to attend our meeting.
Okay. Supervisor Luck, do you have thoughts you want to share before I respond?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Luck, and then we'll go to Mr. Brewer.
I didn't realize that the city council met twice a month, so that does change my perspective a little bit on this. So I'm at this point, I'm feeling less inclined to go ahead and change. I think that Supervisor Severson made some good points.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brewer.
I support the change 100%, and I don't think this was made to avoid a conflict. It was made to allow the city council and the board to handle business in a timely manner. The latest thing was passing the red changes.
Okay. Are there any other county board members who are online who I might not know who you are because all we see is your telephone number up on the screen here.
That one is department head, 5 with the 13.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think you make some really good points as well. I think, Mr. Severson, that you know, I guess part of my thinking here was, you know, let's just move it so we can avoid the conflict. I know, like, I know Joanne Krulot, she covers both meetings in the same night, and that can be challenging sometimes. You know, could economic development have planned that better? Yes, I do think they could have. I don't think our process is so onerous that if you have something that you want to take to a committee, and if the committee agrees with you, it can get to the county board meeting and everything can happen within a couple of weeks. But you have to do some planning and talking ahead of time. So I still support making this change. I know that there will always be conflicts. You know, I think the main question here is about the county board and a lot of the people who end up coming to our county board meetings on a regular basis. So that's really what I was thinking about. Now, if specific people stepped forward and they said, well, I really can't make the third Thursday of every month because I do have this conflict in my schedule. You know, I'm open to changing my mind then, but that's why I'm pitching this. But with that said, there won't be support getting this out of committee today. So I think it's just going to have to stay the way it is for now. And maybe the city council is open to making a change. I'm not sure that they would be, but I think having some conversation with them on a regular basis is a good idea. I don't really know about the city county ad hoc committee. I've never seen minutes. I had never seen agenda, so I don't actually know what that is. And if that communication is happening regularly, I remember it used to happen, but I don't know that it's happening now. So I think communication between the city and the county, you know, could be improved. So, yeah, go ahead.
One more comment, Mr. Chair. The event that there is something that needs to be addressed, you know, let's say Simon's, for example, you got director over there. If she needs to be at a meeting and the county's meeting at the same time, maybe the assistant director steps in and helps with those questions at either or. I think it worked well the other night with Jason was over at city council. Well, then Mike Brenninger come over to the county to speak. Think of some collaboration and working together and pre-planning. I think still could be an effective tool. I think it comes down to, like, if people really want to attend, they're going to attend if they want to, and they're going to find a way.
Both meetings are recorded, so people can always catch up on what's happened. I do that a lot with the city council meetings. I'll watch those, and I'm sure if the city council's interested in something we're doing, they can do that as well. So, okay, well, I think in the interest of time, let's just go ahead and keep moving on here. Since I don't think that we're gonna get any action on that today. So thanks for the discussion on it. I appreciate knowing where other people are at on this because we've never really been in a venue where we could have talked about it that I remember. So I'm sure conversations have happened in the past, but thanks for having one today. Agenda item number 6, committee restructuring. So with this item, let's see, so at our January meeting, we adopted a motion to draft options for restructuring committees to improve efficiency and accountability. So Supervisor-elect, she had volunteered to take a look at this. She researched, did a lot of research and very, very helpful information that she's uncovered. So she's first going to present some different issues, questions, options, and possibilities, and that's in attachment A. And then when she shared that with me late last week, I used her research to draft. I was trying to think, like, how would we actually restructure things? And so I created like a process, a step process with 11 steps that actually move things around. So I'll walk us through that attachment after she does her presentation. So Supervisor Luck, go ahead. And we have the presentation up, and I'm sure folks who are online on WebEx, not on the phone, can see it too. But for folks who are on the phone, you can find this on our committee's website.
All right, so I think first I just want to say that I think it is easiest if I just go through the entire document, and then I'll go back to actually dive in deep to how I got to the 2 different options. But I think what I wanted to do was kind of walk you through my thought process of how I got to those choices. So the first thing I asked myself is, you know, what committees are required and what are we doing now and what are other counties doing? So in looking at our current committee structure, you can see, and this is me simply going off of our committee structure document and our committee, the Excel spreadsheet or the PDF we have online that identifies which supervisors are on which committees. So if you count them all up, there's 54 committees, boards, or commissions. 21 of them meet monthly and 9 meet infrequently, and 24 I couldn't find on our website any published meeting schedule. I'm assuming those meeting schedules probably are on whatever entity the meeting has to do with. And I did not dig into those schedules. So you can go to the next slide. So one of the things we saw in that presentation when Lacrosse was talking about that they have 6 standing committees, when I was looking at that, I was like, they really only have 6? Wow. But then when I dug into their actual committees, they do have a lot of committees. It's just that they use the standing committees as where everything runs through. And so it is more efficient. But it was I felt it was misleading when they said they only have 6 committees. And I realize they use the word standing committees, but I don't know. When I was listening to that presentation, I felt like it was, they only have 6 committees. Their supervisors only have to go to 6 meetings. Well, not even, because they're only on a couple committees each. But as it turns out, they have supervisors on all of those other committees as well. So it's not that we are going to be getting rid of, say, the Joint Ambulance Committee or our local emergency planning committee. We're still going to have some of those committees. We may be able to consolidate them further and make them more efficient as well, but we will still have numerous committees other than just our standing committees. All right, so you can go to the next slide. So then my question was, what's required? And so this was just taken from the WCA. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because he did talk about this in the WCA presentation. But these next 2 committees, I couldn't find anywhere that we have a rural planning committee that is supposed to be required by state statute. But Supervisor Murphy-Lopez was not able to find this committee in any county. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is with that one. And it turns out we do have a traffic safety commission. At first, I didn't think we had one. It's just not written in our committee structure document. It's not really noted anywhere. So we may want to just make that clearer so that we make sure we're fulfilling that statutory requirement. So then I just wanted to know what committees do we have? How often do they meet? How many supervisors are on them? And so this, I'm not saying that this is 100% accurate. Again, this is me just looking at our committee structure document and the spreadsheet that includes what supervisors on what committees. And the one thing I just kind of want to note on these next 4 pages is that you'll see it says, there's many times where it says not in the committee assignment document or not in the committee structure document. Some of them, I couldn't find any evidence that they've ever met. So clearly, even if we wouldn't change our structure, we do need to do some cleanup. And the ones highlighted in green are ones that are statutorily, have a statutory requirement. They fulfill a statutory requirement. So anyway, you can see that it was really kind of convoluted and difficult to really know for sure what committees the county is involved in, how many supervisors and other representatives there might be, where their meeting minutes might, I don't know if there's any kind of open records issues we need to be dealing with, because if a supervisor is on a committee, does that mean it has open records requirements, and those meeting minutes should be able to be found somewhere? So those were questions that I came up as I was going through this. So I think regardless of if we decide to change our structure, we do want to do some cleanup. And so then as I was thinking about this and watching the WCA presentation, I know one of the questions that came up from our committee and has come up in others is, how long will these meetings take? If you're combining all of these departments under one committee, it feels like they would take hours and hours and hours, since our meetings right now take hours and hours. Lacrosse and Ozaki both indicated that their standing committee meetings are 60 to 90 minutes. And I think the reason for that, and what they really hinted at, is that if a department doesn't have anything important to discuss, they don't come to the meeting and they don't have a discussion with that department. It forces the committee, to focus on policy and not looking at the bills and not, hammering in the details of every day-to-day thing that the department is doing. You're really focusing on big picture. And one of the things I was sort of thinking is, we could potentially choose 2 to 3 departments from each, under each standing committee each month to come, and maybe they could report in more detail and give us an update on how that department is doing. But then the rest of the meeting would be spent specifically on issues and policy. The other thing that I found to be very interesting and thought it would be a wonderful idea if we could figure out how to do it is Lacrosse County has a full board policy planning meeting. So this is a meeting where they take no action, but the full board comes together and they actually talk about all the current issues that are going on in the committees. Now you can stay on the slide you're on. And to me, this seems amazing because then it would give the public a chance to understand exactly what's going on in detail. Again, you're not taking any action. It's clearly just a forum to be able to discuss ideas so that you aren't spending time on your board floor going back and forth, hammering these things out. But it's still a public meeting where people can watch and understand what's going on. And it would also be an opportunity for department heads to come before the full board and be able to talk about what happens in their department, things like that. So I felt like that is a really important piece that we could consider. And then the other question that came up is, you know, what are our checks and balances with our bills? So right now, I'm assuming, you know, our accounting supervisor, our accounts payable specialist, those are two of our checks. And then as far as the board's role, it would be the audit committee. So, you know, those are just things that we would need to be thinking about as we go through combining our standing committees, and just making sure that we still fulfill our obligation for our checks and balances. So then we can go to the next slide. You know, in my mind, these were the things that kind of came up as being the real pros for considering consolidation of our committees. You know, it does. If you have just 6 standing committees and each committee member is on 2 committees, they would actually have the ability to attend all of the meetings if they wanted to, so that they could stay better informed of what's going on all across the county. It also would require us to be more focused, you know, to keep our focus on policy and not getting into the day-to-day operations. And also it would give every supervisor the chance to put stuff on future agenda items if we included that as an item on all agendas. So one of the things that both Ozaki and La Crosse brought up as well was that we're paying our department heads and our county administrator a lot of money, and we need to trust that they know how to do their job. We've hired them because they are professionals in their field. And I think that's really important piece to all of this. I know that there will be concern that we're not keeping track of things as well as we should, that we have an obligation to really, you know, be keeping track of things better. But we do need to trust that we've hired the people to do their, you know, good people to do their job. And I believe that we have hired good people to do their jobs. And so, you know, we need to really pull back from our, you know, being on the day-to-day, trying to micromanage and really focus on big picture and policy. So then I will tell you that I did look at a bunch of different counties and what their committee structures look like. And it was amazing. I don't think I found 2 that were the same. I think there are 72 different ways that people do this. So I did kind of focus in on La Crosse and Ozaki, mostly because I felt like they have been doing this way for a long time, many years. It's worked really well for them. It seemed very thought out, and that they had, you know, kind of worked out the kinks. That isn't to say that we are exactly the same as them and won't have things we need to figure out, but that's how I got to these 2 options. And they're both of them are kind of a hybrid of both. So this first option is very close to La Crosse, and essentially what I tried to do was take all of our departments and make sure all of the departments are represented within here. And I didn't pull out any, so in La Crosse, they had pulled out ARDC and some other kind of sub departments. And that, after speaking with Sean, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. That, you know, I mean, why would I pull ARDC out of Health and Human Services when they're a sub department of Health and Human Services? So, so that's what you're seeing in this particular grouping. The reason that I went to the next option was that I felt like when you're looking at the executive committee on this particular, and you can stay on that one for just a second, I just was feeling like the executive committee was going to be incredibly overwhelmed with things that they're responsible for. You will note the bottom one on that is asterisk with county board. And this is where we are envisioning our capital, strategic, and comprehensive planning would take place. Any rules and ethics issues would be dealt with through there. All of our budget would be brought through this committee, as well as any issues coming from the other standing committees. So I was starting to feel like this committee would just, there would be a lot of responsibility on this committee. So then if you go to the next option, what I did was, and this one is a little bit more like Wazaki in that they consider their executive committee to be the hub of their wheel. So they really are very, very closely focused on policy and planning, strategic and comprehensive planning, capital planning. They do still handle the budget, and they go into union negotiations and rules and ethics. But I felt like if I could pull the finance part out, where county clerk, treasurer, MIS, economic development, and child support were handled under finance, and then that committee would also handle some of the preliminary budget work that goes on, and then would pass it off to the executive committee when it's a little further along, that could really free up the executive committee to be very focused on policy and planning. And the other big difference with this one is you'll see that I put Pine Valley and Veterans under Health and Human Services Board. And to me, the reason for that was that they have very similar issues that they face as far as staffing and a lot of their services, you know, they're aging, dealing with aging community. And so it just, to me, it kind of made sense that they would be all together. UW Food Services in that column because essentially they provide our nutrition services for our nutrition sites. And so it made sense to keep them under Health and Human Services instead of under UW Richland. Or UW Platteville Richland, sorry. So this one is a big one. I could see potentially not wanting to combine Veterans and Pine Valley. And wanting to have, you know, another standing committee under this kind of structure, or not having this finance committee piece pulled out and, you know, going back to the previous one. So let's just go down. I just want to briefly talk about what kind of my thinking of what these this is just quickly on this slide. This just simply, so these are these subcommittees that we were talking about, or these other small committees that meet on a less than regular basis. This is just kind of highlighting where we might put them, what committee they would report to. So for example, the Joint Ambulance Committee is still going to exist. It's still a necessary entity to exist, but they would then, if they have any issues that need to come before the county board, they would go through the Public Safety Committee and then on up from there. So the next slide. So this slide, it was just giving you an example of potentially, and this is a little different than I think what Supervisor Murphy Lopez was thinking. I think he was thinking we might do something closer to lacrosse where any board member is only on 2. So if you're on the executive committee, you're only on 1 other committee. So if you're a chair of a committee, then you would, and you're so at a chair of any of, like if you're chair of finance, HHS, public safety, natural resources, or public works, you would automatically be a member of the executive committee. So in that scenario, you would be on, you know, whatever you're chair of, and then you would be on executive. I was thinking we could potentially split it up where people would be on 2, and if you are a chair, you would potentially be on a 3rd, the executive committee. So this is just simply one example of how it could potentially be divvied up. So you can go to the next slide. So again, I just want to kind of briefly talk about, so these are the duties that I was kind of thinking would fall under these categories. So, and this is, I guess this would essentially be option B that we're talking about here. And then, so go to the next committee. So that's the executive committee. That's chair of each committee is on the executive committee. So here's the issues that if we did have a finance committee, you know, they would be looking at the elections, fiscal policy, personnel, IT, child support, investments, things like that. And, you know, IT, especially as we move forward with trying to have some more universal IT across departments, you know, that itself can be a big undertaking as well. So it was kind of in my mind as I was splitting these things out. So I'll go to the next one. So again, HHS, you know, if we combine all of those, they would be focusing on mental health, senior services, veteran services, and then your you know, kind of your health and human services items. You can go on to the next one. And public safety, I mean, public safety honestly isn't going to change much. We're already, you know, hearing from everyone on this except emergency management and ambulance. So it wouldn't be that much of a change for that particular committee. And then go to the next one. This one does get kind of big, but again, we're talking about two things are on our radar right now. In strategic planning, we've been talking about evaluating combining of departments, and in here, you know, this having these different departments under the same standing committee would actually help in that, if we were to combine, say, land conservation and zoning and land information, they would all be under the same committee anyway, so it would actually make sense, and wouldn't be that much of a disruption if we were to combine departments. So I think, is that, oh, Public Works, sorry. Yeah, and so, yep, you can keep going down, Public Works. So again, you know, they're really focusing on our, you know, property that we own and buildings that we own. And it makes sense, I think, to have all of those things together. So if you want to go back up to the two different options, I think that's probably where we want to pause and hear thoughts. Unless you don't have thoughts.
Either one of you have thoughts you want to share right now, or you know, I can. When I first saw all this, I thought there are a lot of issues in here, and so I had to get my mind around it once I saw what Supervisor Luck had come up with. So that's why I took everything to a spreadsheet and started, like, there's 54. You know, it's like overwhelming. When I saw that first slide, I was like, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming to think about this. And so I started sorting things, and I was real clear about how I move things around. So if you want, I can walk you through that. If you want to share thoughts first before I walk through how I was trying to make sense of all this.
I like certain aspects of what is being proposed. I still think that we have a lot more work to do on hashing the different things out. For example, some smaller committees like the Parks Commission, you know, that's got 3 citizen members. What is our intent? Like, we want them to meet separately because that's kind of a working committee. You know, the fair committee's a working committee. Like, do we still want to keep them and then they just report to a bigger committee, or does the people who are under, you know, the standing committee, I don't know which one she has it under without looking back again, for like fair, like, are they going to be the ones that are going to go out there and help out the fairgrounds or the parks to do certain work? So I think there's stuff to be worked out yet. I think this is a good start, consolidating and looking. There's also that she didn't mention in there in her thing, there's also another committee called the Aging Disability Resource Center Governing Board, which a county board supervisor and a citizen member from Richland County sit on that board also.
And the highway committee is elected.
Yeah, the highway committee is an elected, and I don't know if that sits separate, under that public work. I don't know. It's just stuff that, this is a good guideline to start out with, and then I just think that we just need to look in depth a little bit more, have more discussions, like a forum type discussion per se, I guess. I do like the aspect for the budget part of it. Like, how do you catch if somebody is embezzling money? You know, where does that go and how does that get caught? You know, what's the 3 different committees before it goes through, before it gets paid, essentially, and I don't know if somebody could do that, but an example is the coroner, like coroner's under the Law Enforcement Judiciary Committee, but we don't see any bills from him. We don't barely see a budget from him, and it goes right to audit. Audit pays the bill. I don't know. I'm sure there'll be some more questions that I have. Those are my thoughts. I'm not opposed. I like it. To start.
Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you for sharing. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna, so I did get a call from Director Gunjan this morning, just asking questions about how the Joint Ambulance Committee he thought that maybe it was going away. And again, I want to emphasize that and I think, Sean, you've got this in your document where it's not that those smaller committees are going away. Some of them might, but many of them serve a purpose that we still need to fulfill, and they will still happen. It's just consolidating who they report to and how, if they have items to come before the county board, how that process works. So as far as like the ARDC, Veteran Service Commission, those things all still will happen because many of those are required. That's why Sean's document might help. Maybe we should go through your document now, because yours really shows like where those all smaller committees, what happens to them.
Okay, Mr. Cosgrove, do you want to say anything before? Okay, just wanted to make sure all of us have had a chance to speak. So I put all these in a spreadsheet and I created 11 different worksheets at the bottom, and then I labeled each one as step 1 through step 11. So I know that there are mistakes in here. This is just a way just to start laying it out so we can start catching what are we missing? Or what steps shouldn't we be taking, or where are people going to disagree with different moving things around. So that's why I laid it all out like this in so many steps. So it might be a little cumbersome, but hopefully it makes sense. So step 1, I created 2 categories. The first category was county board committees with departmental oversight. And I got 22 of those. And then I just have other committees. So in my mind, these were just committees that really don't oversee different departments. They just are other committees where we have special appointments made, or they're advisory, or some other thing that I don't even understand sometimes. I don't know about all 54 committees, but that's how I split those up into 2 categories. Then step 2, highlighted in yellow, I was thinking, especially with economic development, because we were having that discussion at the last county board meeting, we really have some unique shared committees or boards at the county where we are working with other government agencies. So Joint Ambulance Committee has a lot of township and village representation on it. Economic development is basically a 3-way split between the city, the county, and the private sector. Simon's is roughly equal between the city and the county. So in step 3, I pulled those 3 out. I created a new column and I called it Partnership Committees with Departmental Oversight. Because really those 3 different bodies, they oversee staff that are kind of shared in a way, is how I was thinking about it, with other government agencies. They're not exclusively county government employees, although they might get their paycheck from the county. There's other government agencies chipping in quite a bit of money to make those departments work. So then step 4, I was hearing about, some different things, or just trying to keep track of different things changing. Now, I highlighted in red committees that I think are becoming obsolete. Now, some of these might not have been approved by the county board. I don't think all these decisions have been made. I'm just trying to organize our thoughts here, thinking if we did go through this restructuring. So Committee on Committees is highlighted, Administrator Transition is highlighted, City County, back to my question from earlier, Hidden Valleys, I think that's out. I'm not sure. We pulled their funding. And then Supervisor Luck told me Southwest Badger Resource Conservation and Development Council is no longer meeting. Folks might know about other ones. that really don't belong anymore. That's a step where we could kind of pull out the obsolete stuff. And so in step 5, then I moved all those to the right column under a new column called obsolete committees. And then with step 6, highlighted in green, this is what I was really, to me, this gets down to the heart of what we're trying to do. These are our regular committees that have departmental oversight, and these are the ones we're really thinking about consolidating. So there's 18 of them. I'm leaving ambulance, economic development, and Simons alone because they're shared with other government bodies. So step 7, what I had to do is I had to leave that spreadsheet and that way of looking at it and think, which departments does each of those 18 committees really oversee? There's some of them that we're not used to using that term, but I was trying to think about, well, who are the departments that are going to some of these more unusual committees? So a lot of them, you know, it's just child support. Committee oversees child support department, emergency management, repair and recycling, so on and so forth. But audit is a kind of unique one. You have Clerk Kalish going to the audit committee, I believe, but then you have the accounting supervisor who's probably, and I'm making some guesses here, I don't know all this stuff for sure, but the accounting supervisor is approving a lot of expenses, and the accounting supervisor we've moved under the administrator, so it's really some combination between the administrator and the clerk department. Finance and personnel, we've got 6 listed out there, and then LEJC is the other one that Supervisor Luck was talking about, where you already have several departments going to one committee. And then the only other one that is, I think, more unique is UW Richland, where they got UW Food Services and UW Richland Maintenance both going there. And then actually a couple more is this committee, who really reports, no department reports to it. This is really a committee. I mean, we just deal with county board issues, like how do we want to be structured? What do we want our rules to be? That's mostly what we do. Also, strategic planning is another one. We're setting the strategic plan for the county through that committee. So it's really a county board committee is kind of how I was trying to think about it. So in step 8, so what I did is I took Supervisor Luck's charts that she had made in her PowerPoint presentation, and I was a little more strict in what I put underneath each of the categories. So like, for example, under the executive committee on her option A, she had economic development listed under it. Well, it's really a unique, it's kind of a board into of itself, like Simons and ambulance. So I kept those 3 out of that whole mix. And I just was thinking about what departments would go to each committee. So the only changes I made to her chart here is I just pulled out things that weren't within that first column that I had highlighted in green, where we had 18 different bodies that to be consolidated. And then on option B, on the next slide, so step 8, option B, I took her option B and I did the same thing. So what departments would actually report to each of these different new standing committees if we use this option? So I think the more important point under here is to see executive and finance and kind of how they would be a little more split apart compared to the first option, where you would just have executive and finance functions would go under them as well. I was assuming, I put a little note here that because the clerk reports to finance, as far as any issues that come up with the clerk's department, that's the way our current committee structure document is, that the audit function would go to finance under this option, because the clerk mostly, we have the clerk and the administrator under option 2 with this one. That was an assumption I made, so I wasn't sure if that was right, so I just wrote it out. And then option C, I just wrote out some of just you know, it's kind of nice just to get your thoughts out, and I'm sure we could have 21 of these if people wanted to, you know, but I just wanted to get my thoughts out on another option. So under this option C that I created under the executive committee, I don't have a separate finance one under option C. I've got the administrator, the clerk, the county board, and the treasurer. So I took some things that Supervisor Luck had under option A, under executive, I took away to relieve some of that pressure that she is mentioning that, you know, she's envisioning could happen, and I can envision it too. So I've got MIS pulled over to the fifth one, which is Public Works and Infrastructure, thinking about it more as infrastructure. And then I pulled child support over to Health and Human Services. To me, that just kind of makes sense in my mind, at least, whether right or wrong. And then I left veterans, I call it veterans and seniors instead of veterans and aging or long-term care. So that was another small difference. Another difference with this one is fair and recycling. I actually split out, thinking that recycling might make more sense under natural resources and fair might make more sense under infrastructure. But again, right or wrong, it's just another option and way of thinking about it. So whatever, then if you go to step 9, whatever we choose, if we decide to move forward with all this, the idea would be consolidate it down to 6 standing committees. That's option A, B, and C all have 6. Maybe that's not the right number, but that's what I've got listed here. Now, if we were to go do that, so to your point, Mr. Severson, I was thinking about the fair board too. So I had created this 9th step where you really have to create some additional committees in order to deal with this issue of, you know, you're not probably going to have the standing committee or whatever it was called under fair, under the different models, go out and volunteer. You probably need to create a fair volunteer committee or something to keep that effort going. And similarly, maybe you would need that for parks. I didn't include that in this step. I hadn't thought of that, but I think that makes sense. The Traffic Safety Commission that Supervisor Luck mentioned, I added that under that last column since it's not in our committee structure document right now, even though they are meeting. I've been to one of those meetings. And then the Veteran Service Commission, this is that one that Mr. Seep has been pushing us to do, where you've got 3 citizens on that committee. We don't have that separate from the Veteran Service Committee, but if we did this model, you could have veterans under one of the standing committees and then create the Veteran Service Commission under the last column. So then the 10th step is, I think the other committees is kind of a confusing column. It's like too much of a bucket in my mind. Oh, and I should back up to, on step 9, in that column that says partnership committees, ambulance, economic development, and Simons, I've got it in parentheses that it would report to one of those standing committees, just like Supervisor Luck was mentioning. Then if you go to step 10, I highlight that last column where I felt like that bucket was too big. And in step 11, I split those out into 2 different groups that I think might make sense, although I probably don't have them categorized all correctly. But the first column that I've got it split out under is, and I probably should have highlighted all these in yellow, so it'd be the 2 right columns. So second from the right is advisory committees. And I didn't add anything after each one about reporting to standing committees, but I think they would have to basically report to some standing committee before things could go before the full county board if for some reason they need to bring something forward. But there I've got ADA, that ADRC board, although I think I've got it mislabeled there, the branding committee that we just created, courthouse security, the fair volunteer one, land information, local emergency planning committee that Supervisor Luck mentioned earlier, traffic safety commission, I won't read them all, but zoning board of adjustment, they would probably report to the whatever standing committee had zoning on it. And then the special appointment committees in that very last column. So I was thinking of this as more like, you know, like the Viola Library Board. The county board chair appoints one of the county board members or a citizen to the Viola Library Board. So it's really not a committee of the board. It's just something we're involved with because state law requires that we have representation because we give county taxpayer dollars to the Viola Library Board. So there's just different things around that we're involved with only because we're we need some representation on these various committees. So that's kind of how I was thinking about how could we potentially organize this. And then that last one, I think this kind of has to do with, and this is kind of early on, but, I think, so I don't think this is really something that we, I definitely don't think we're ready to take action on anything like this. But in order to think about, well, how would you populate all these standing committees? You almost kind of have to think about, well, who would be on what and how would they get on there, considering that we don't want the county board chair to appoint committee chairs. We want those to be elected by each committee. And how would you split this up fairly with 21 people? That's what I was kind of trying to figure out. And that's what Supervisor Luck was kind of getting into with that one where you had 8 members on each. But I was thinking of it as if you have 6 standing committees, and I'm just thinking about the standing committees here, not those other ones. You just have those, you have 6 of them. And if you had 7 people on each one of those standing committees, that would be 42 seats. And then if you divide that by 2, that's 21. That's how many county board members we have. So that would be a even fair way to split it up. If you did 8, like Supervisor Luck was saying, then you'd have to, some people would get more than others for the standing committees. And that's been always kind of one of my complaints about the way we do things currently, is that the county board seems to give people who have longer tenure more committees, or the more powerful committees, and the newer people just kind of get the little stuff. And so that's why I was kind of thinking that if, as a county board, we could split things out more roughly evenly or fairly if that's the way it happens. So I don't need to read through all these, but because we want to appoint or elect our own committee chairs, it makes it a little more complicated, because then the county board chair can't just appoint those committee chairs. So it would make the organizational meeting more complex, where you basically populate all the standing committees, but there's a way you could do it, I think. The highway committee thing, I did find the state statute, and I've got that in the in one of the further agenda items. So the state law allows the county board to choose how the highway committee is populated. You can either elect from the county board, or you can set any other method you want, including the county board chair appointing the members of the highway committee. So we do have that flexibility, and I'm assuming we have that flexibility with Pine Valley as well. I didn't find a statute to that effect. I couldn't find it.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I think that was mentioned in the recent Wisconsin Counties Association meetings, where they were talking about if you don't have anything, you defer to like a highway committee being elected. You establish, I believe, by ordinance a process to fill in for that. Then you have invoking your home rule statute. Then you're able to maneuver on it in a different way. Maybe not ordinance, but by rule. Hopefully at some point we'd have established by ordinance.
I don't have anything else to say at the moment. So what thoughts do other folks on the committee have, or?
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
So, I mean, I was just kind of thinking about next steps, and I think in order to actually work through all of the different things like what Supervisor Severson brought up, I mean, if we were to just, and we don't have to stick with it necessarily, but if we were to pick one of these options today, then we could flesh out exactly how we would get to the end, like how this would all work out and what committees. But without kind of picking something, it's a little hard to move forward with working all of that out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we, Mr. Severson, you had mentioned something about having some sort of a forum or a discussion. And I really like that, and that's why on the cover sheet, number 2, I was kind of thinking along those lines too. And me and Supervisor Luck had talked about this. It's such a big thing, that we got to figure out some way to not just have this all happen in just this committee, but somehow how to keep others informed and giving them an opportunity to provide comments on this, because it's going to require several minds to make this really, really work well. We're going to be successful like these other counties were.
Say something too. I think we need to get a background too on why some of these committees were formed and how they got there. As an example, I see that you took away recycling from Fair Committee, and I think prior to recycling being with the Fair Committee, I think it was either with land conservation or it was associated with parks. I'm not positive, but I know probably 10 years ago, it may have gotten moved from them and thrown in with Fair. And I think that's why, let's say former Supervisor Marshall, Rock Buford Marshall, was on the Fair Committee for quite a number of times, because that had a committee change, the name changed, where Fair took over with recycling. So I think we need to figure out why some of these got moved over to where they did. And then maybe we need to think about other departments, like who's running certain different programs that we have. For example, snowmobile program that the county is in charge of, that maybe land conservation is really working hard on other stuff to provide good work, and maybe it's not, doesn't have the time that it could be dedicated to the snowmobile program, and maybe that gets moved over to a different department that may have a little bit more time that could associate with that, so we can figure it out. I think we just need to figure out how we got some of these committees in the way that we've gotten them. Like the Parks Commission, I think, was supposed to be by resolution of the county board. Like, I've never really seen that resolution ever. I've asked Victor for it before, and he gave me something, but I don't think it ever says so. Like, how did we get to where we are today with these committees?
So I'm glad you brought up those examples, because, and I don't know that that option C that I laid out, where fair and recycling are split, is the right answer. And I'm not hung up on that. I wouldn't, but I do think that, like, Carla Doudna, she manages both fair and recycling, but that doesn't mean that she, as a department head, couldn't go to one committee for fair related issues that are bigger, and one committee for recycling related issues.
Yes.
It also doesn't mean that just because, the snowmobile issue is currently under the Parks Commission, right? And we only have 0.1 FTE staff that do park stuff. That doesn't mean that you still couldn't move say the snowmobile function or the parks function that's currently under under the Land Conservation Department to another department. So that stuff is almost, in my mind, kind of separate, although I can see how you might want to coordinate some things, but do you always want to make that the rule? I don't know that you need to. This is really just when department heads need to come to the county board to get approval for something, or to set a policy on something, or if they want to give a report on what their department's doing. It's, do you need that one little silo you're coming to, or can you come to something that's a little more broader? And that's, I think, the main concern I have with our current model is the silo nature of it, and how it's so hard to understand what everyone's doing, especially for our administrator, but for us as county board members, because there are 18 different meetings to go to, and you don't have conversations between department heads, and you don't have department heads presenting in front of other department heads. They got their own little area, and the county board members can only think about that in that meeting. But if you bring in a few different departments, then you got to think about a little bit of the bigger picture. And so that's another thing I like about it. It holds us accountable as county board members. I think it holds department heads accountable. It can hold the administrator accountable, so he can be able to attend a lot of different things. So
Would that be kind of like the example of Health and Human Services discussion at Finance and Personnel the other day, where they made a proposal that maybe every county employee could be susceptible to a certain thing that they're doing, but then other county employees took it out of context and was doing because they didn't understand that what was already talked before in the past? Is that what you're kind of saying?
That's what I'm referring to. Say if under option 8, under my step process here that I've got laid out, under option 8, what would I wouldn't pick the first one, A, because that's really just, well, no, Supervisor Luck, you put UW Food Service in there. But under option B, where you've got HHS, Pine Valley, UW Food Services, and Veterans all reporting to the same standing committee, that might be a very different conversation than the one you all had in January at HHS, and then the one that we had on Tuesday at Finance. And then similarly under option C, then you could, under that model, it would be HHS, Child Support, and Food Services. So again, you've got 3 different department heads reporting to the same committee. You can't just think about one department. You got to think about other departments too before you push something out to the finance or the executive.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we already kind of do this in LEJC, I think that exactly what you're saying is exactly what happened. So we have multiple departments, and I can't tell you the number of times the sheriff will bring something up, and then it's brought to our attention how the ripple effect of what that will impact that will have on the courts, or, you know, so there's many times when an issue is brought up by one department, and because we have other department heads present, it brings the discussion into a whole different area, and I find it to be very helpful.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Any other thoughts? I know we have 2 county board members here today too. We have the chair of our county board, Mr. Brewer, and then we've got Ms. Gentis, I believe.
Yes.
Do you all have any thoughts you'd like to share? Because we certainly want to hear feedback from other county board members.
Sean,
and the chair of our board. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Brewer.
I foresee all kinds of discussion and points and counterpoints as we wind our way through these. But I agree with Melissa. If you want to move forward, you're going to have to choose one and throw it out there and let people have their turn at it. That's the only thing that will accomplish getting down the road.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Gentis, do you have any thoughts you want to share today?
No, I like what you're discussing and sort of agree with Mr. Brewer. I'm trying to move back and forth between what you're doing and what is on the agenda, and so I need to really look at it carefully.
Okay, thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
Administrator Langrick, I just had a couple thoughts I wanted to share in regards to it. So I guess how I visualize it too is some of your talking points to kind of consider is going to be the different authorities and the tasks that you would kind of place with these. I'm thinking back of like the example, I believe it was La Crosse County as presented through the Wisconsin Counties Association presentation. I want to think that they mentioned that like the executive committee also kind of acts as a review on resolutions then. So you kind of have a gatekeeper on resolutions that are going to reach the county board floor and not advocating for one or another. But, you know, I see that then as kind of the difference between an option A and an option B is the 6 different committees on an option A then all have access to bring forward resolution versus like a B arrangement where then I would see there's kind of still an executive committee acting as a gatekeeper from 5 committees. So I guess my point is part of the conversation being the different authorities that you see establishing with these standing committees. If you're going to take the efforts to bring in larger kind of silos, if you will, and have multiple departments and having almost what I would visualize as 5 or 6 smaller county board type meetings what types of authorities that you would like to distribute down from a county board level to those standing committees. Example given like in Greene County where their personnel committee was kind of authorized ownership of the handbook. They had their parameters on like if there was a wage increase or something of a mass compensation kind of a flex, then that still required county board action. But they parceled out more of the authorities and more of the pieces that you're seeing coming forward to the county board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great points. Thanks for sharing those. Yep, Mr. Severson.
What's the difference between a committee and a commission? What's the purpose of like why we have some commissions and then some, isn't for some to receive some funding money? Or they got different authorities to where they can do certain things versus a committee doesn't have that? I mean, like, so that's what I was trying to get at is like, why do we have the setup that we have? We got to figure that out first.
Speaking of layman things onto that, Mr. Chair, from what I know, and I think Attorney Wendell is rifling for definitions, legal definitions at right now. From what I see from practices, how it would impact appointments is kind of the first thing I see where committees are right now queued as an appointment by a county board chair, executive, I believe. And then your commission and your boards are an appointment by an administrator. Second is across the county, when I see commissions, I'm thinking of like your airport commission, Veterans Service Commission. They're operating autonomously, kind of influence from the county board to some extent. Like an airport commission, they're supposed to be visualized as having their own pot of money and discretion on spending from that. Like a Veterans Service Commission, also with making decisions on grants to needy veterans. Attorney Wendell might be able to provide a more legal type of definition, but that's how I see it in practice. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I mean, when I made the step process things, I mostly left all that off because I think that's very confusing. I've heard Mr. Brewer, has brought that question up before, not knowing the difference between those. I don't know the difference. I think some of it's just whatever the state legislators at the time decided to write into the state statute or whatever the people who made it. You know, I think the important thing is to come up with our categories of what do we think different things belong into what different categories. Because if we just say, well, all committees have to be together, all commissions, all boards have to be together, I think it's not going to make sense for us just because of all that historical stuff that happened. And I just don't know why all that historical stuff happened, or why did they name the Emergency Management Committee in state statute a committee and not a board? I don't know. Or library boards have a library I just don't know. It's confusing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Judging from comments made at the city council meeting the other night, it was suggested there that the Richland Economic Development Committee ought to be a commission so it could accept donations and monies. So maybe that's a distinction. I'm not sure of that, but that distinction was made.
Yeah, that's certainly some research that we could do as we develop. If we choose one of these options and decide to develop it, we could look into that, see if we can find information. But I certainly don't know.
I guess what I see happening is that we may go to like these standing committees, but then I also think that there's going to be this separate, like you said before, like where the Joint Ambulance Committee and the Economic Development assignments. I think that's going to increase with a few more. Kind of what I'm getting. We got to kind of figure out how and what goes where to that column.
Yeah, it has to be flexible enough to deal with other things as they come up, or certainly I don't think I got everything right in these. No. You know, I know there's stuff, there's errors.
There's a lot of options out here to pick, and I just don't know which one to pick from to go to move forward.
Well, yeah, if we pick an option, it doesn't mean that we can't.
Well, Sean, you know that there's going to be unintended consequences, whatever we do, things that we haven't thought about. So, like I said before, I think all we can do is take a cut at it and see what happens.
I agree with you. Mr. Cosgrove?
Yeah, and just because we pick an option today doesn't mean it has to be the option we are stuck with. And to Clint's point about having the executive being the catch-all for everything, I don't see an option like that in your presentation where the executive committee is of the rest of the standing committees. It's just the way it's laid.
I particularly like the idea of the executive committee. We saw how well that worked at Iowa County when we visited there a couple of years ago, so.
I guess what I'm referring to is option B and Melissa's.
Yeah, in the spreadsheet, I put the executive committee next to the finance committee and HHS board and other ones, right?
So
And
is
in
that the way
hers
they funnel too?
in hers, she had it above. And yeah, I think if we pick option B, the spreadsheet would have to be, if we're still looking at the spreadsheet too, the spreadsheet has to be changed to move that. You're right. That should be moved. So, okay, if we go back to the cover sheet, we've got 2 recommended motions today. So we could use these as a starting point. The first one would be a motion to recommend adopting 11 steps for restructuring committees, as well as a motion to adopt option A, B, or C, so choose one in the 8th step, and then return to Rules and Resolutions Committee with a revised committee structure document for consideration at the March meeting. So when I wrote that, I was thinking, kind of fleshing some of this out. I don't know if it's just the committee structure document, maybe it's other stuff too, but. So does someone want to make that motion and pick one of the options?
From either Melissa's or yours or both or?
Yeah, I think A, B, or C. And I think if you're looking at the spreadsheet that I created, just remember that option B, the executive committee, is not, it should be above the other 5. And then if you're looking at her spreadsheet, or I'm sorry, her PowerPoint presentation, it's laid out correctly. Hers just doesn't have C in it. So, I mean, I think personally, any of these options would be really good. I'm certainly not wedded to option C just because I wrote it down. I just think we just need to move forward with one too. So
Langrick, are you able to put whatever option C or that he was talking about on his documents so that I can look at both of them? Here, I guess.
I think Mr. Cosgrove or Mr. Severson, if either one of you want to make the motion, that'd be great. Yeah, we put a lot of work into this, so I don't think one of us should do it. Your Supervisor Luck. That's why I'm hesitant. At least I don't know about you, Ms. Luck.
I was having the same thought. Yeah, I could go with any of the 3 options. So
I'm just going for somewhere to start out with. At least I would start out with option B. I would move to select option B of Melissa's document where it's got the executive committee above there, and then we can have a starting point to work from.
Can I ask which option of Sean's that you liked?
He's got a lot up there that were like, all right, but
I only had one. I just had option C in the spreadsheet.
it's different.
Right. Option A and B are almost identical except for the executive committee. And then I did pull like economic development out of hers if you go back to the PowerPoint, Mr. Langreck.
So my question, Carrie, is do you like the way the sleeves are created in option C and Sean's? Because we can amend that option C looks like option B of Melissa's where the executive committee becomes above the other standing.
Whatever.
Can you say that into the mic?
I think I prefer option C categorically with the way things are laid out.
With the executive
being above.
Okay, so you're in different spots. So
Can I ask Supervisor Cosgrove a question?
Yep, go ahead.
Do you like option C because Health and Human Services doesn't have Pine Valley and Veterans? Do you feel like that's too much for HHS? Or what?
Partially. And I feel MIS is more of a public work infrastructure thing versus being under the executive committee.
And what are your feelings on how much is on executive's plate in that version?
Well, due to the fact that we're moving as executive above and they're going to be the catch-all, I think they're going to have enough on their plate at that point anyways.
But that's what I'm saying. They're going to have, without the finance piece, they're going to have everything on their plate for budget, plus, you know, plus all of the strategic and policy
And
stuff.
I guess that's where my mindset is with MIS not being in there as well.
Okay.
Mr. Cosgrove said none of them are bad. What if we just fleshed out, we could just try to flesh out B and C to some extent.
That could be done after we pick an option, right?
That's true.
Nothing's written in stone.
I'm certainly okay with going with, you know, option B for now. You know, at least to flesh it out, and then we can move things around. We can move things around later. So
I'll second Carrie's motion.
okay, so we got a motion by Severson to go with option B, and a second by Cosgrove. My only well, let's just go ahead and just take a vote on that one, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with it.
Discussion.
Oh, it's a good discussion. Go ahead. Sure.
I guess, in my opinion, I want it on record knowing that like we're just picking this option just to study it, not to make this a final thing. And maybe, you know, some people think that, you know, Pine Valley shouldn't be under Health and Human Services or because they have their board trustees. It's also citizen members on that also that, hey, this is just somewhere to start out with and we're going to be picking and choosing. That may not be the final resting spot for that particular entity.
Yes, I think I know where you're going with those comments. So we're certainly not forwarding this to the county board for our recommendation today. We need to work on this quite a bit more.
Mr. Chair,
study this. Yes.
were you saying that we will discuss kind of the details after we make the motion, or should, because if we want to, I mean, I agree. I think we should make a hybrid between B and C. And so I think, so are you saying we'll discuss after we decide that we're going to do a hybrid?
I think we need some clear direction from this committee today about what we're fleshing out. So if we're fleshing out B, then I think we just need to be clear about that. We can still make changes to B later and bring some elements of C into it. Or if we need to flesh out a hybrid of B and C, we can say that too, if that's our opinion, you know. So I think we need to be clear with ourselves so that whoever's working on this behind the scenes and bringing it back to the March meeting, they really know what direction they got from the committee.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I'd like to know from Administrator Langrick his feelings on, because I am hesitant about the HHS having Pine Valley and Veterans on it. I mean, that is a lot, and maybe they're too different. So I would really like to hear if he has any thoughts from a departmental standpoint of how much that makes sense.
There's several elements, and not knowing how the practice is going to lay out. I guess my immediate kind of concerns again to consider is, you know, what types of authorities and responsibilities are you going to have with the board or the committees thereof. You know, I visualize it in a committee structure where you're going to have a group of people and you're going to have to say fulfilling state statute obligations for this board and fulfilling state obligations for this types of bits for it. So it's going to come hand in hand again with how we're going to define the roles and the authorities and the responsibilities of the committee And then two, then probably, passing down authorities, responsibilities through policies to departments to be able to work again without having day-to-day types of decisions that need to be made by bodies. So a recent conversation that I had with the Finance and Personnel Committee chair was, rather than bringing us, Mr. Administrator, continuous decisions on taking action on this, bring us a policy that's addresses how it's going to be handled this time, but then also defines how it should be handled in the future. So that's where I see this all moving towards.
To reduce the amount of stuff on our agendas.
Correct.
So that
yeah,
we're not.
in context of that. And if I could just make one more comment while I have the floor here. So I like where we're going here as a committee today. I think you should continue on the path of you've taken action so far to kind of establish that what I've gathered is that you like an executive committee in between your standing committees and your board. Recommendation for continuing to flesh it out would then move down the hierarchy. You like these names of these standing committees, and then you like these, motion to making motions to, I think this department should move here or there, maybe another course of action, how to get guidance in place to come back with a finalized proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's where I was thinking, sorry, Mr. Yeah. That's where I was thinking that we would possibly have that little forum or that group together where we kind of hash that stuff out, talk amongst it. And I'm still thinking that we're going to have these standing committees with these departments, and I don't think we're going to be able to put most of that stuff under the standing committees. I think that there's going to have to be, what we got here, 5. I think that there's going to be a 6th tab where there's just going to be some other committees or commissions that are standalone, that act alone, that are going to come up and make decisions and resolutions that they're going to bring forward. And I think that they're going to avoid the standing committees. I think those are going to go directly to the board. I think at some point, there's just going to be, like, I don't know how many is going to be out there, but I just think that they're going to be their own, because I think it's too much. It's a word and I can't think of it right now while I'm talking, but it's I just going from one committee and then it's got to go to another committee and go to another committee. In order for it to go to county board, I think there's just too much of that where it can just bypass all that and just go straight on if they're their own little entity.
Mr. Chair, may I comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess another way, coming at this from strictly an audit, we have 2 committees here, 2 boards, whatever you want to call them, that are considered enterprise. That would be the Highway and Pine Valley. And those 2 are probably ones that might be set aside standalones. Just thinking out loud here.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to comment on, in looking at other counties, there are many counties that have public works set up where if they have, well, the all highway is under with other ones. So there must be a way to make that, whether they're enterprise or not, there must be a way to make it work under this type of structure, because this is what other counties are doing. So, and I will just say that I'm kind of leaning towards C now, I have to say. I've always been hesitant about the Pine Valley and veterans, and that it seems like it could work, but I'm not sure how well it could work. So anyway, I don't know. I'm sort of leaning towards C right now.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm going to make a motion to amend.
Okay.
That we look at creating a hybrid of B and C as the direction.
Okay, so it's a motion to amend by Cosgrove.
Second.
Okay, second by Severson. Any further discussion on the motion to amend to make a hybrid of B and C? Those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, and so now we have an amended motion. So instead of considering just moving forward with option B, it would be a hybrid of B and C. I don't know if we really need to vote on it again, because it almost kind of replaced the former one. So I think even though we called it a motion to amend, it might just, that other one, we might just say that's a motion now and the other one dies. But let's keep, let's see if there's anything else we should flesh out about guidance for creating a hybrid of B and C. So on what I was laying out today, I had a motion to recommend adopting 11 steps for restructuring committees. So is that something the committee is comfortable with, the way I laid out how to categorize different things? I know you're kind of saying, Mr. Severson, well, there might be another category that maybe you don't have on here, or you really need to always have all of those report to other standing committees. And my thought on this is, we have a lot that comes to county board right now. I think we have way too much that comes to county board. I think some of these things could be, we could change the way our rules are laid out, or some of our policies about what needs to come to county board. I think there's a lot of little purchases that come that I don't think always need to go to the county board. But on the flip side, if we have committees out there that don't report to any standing committee, to me, sometimes things don't get fleshed out well enough, and say an advisory committee, and if you have to go to a standing committee before you go to a county board with something big, not that you have to take everything to the county board, isn't that a good thing sometimes, so that you have more minds that are looking at it, so that you don't bring something to a county board that's like partially baked?
There'd be instances like that, I assume.
That's kind of why I like the idea of having the advisory committees or other committees having to at least report to a standing committee, because you get more minds involved is what if you just have one county board member on say it's Hidden Valleys, that's a good example, even though that's probably obsolete now. Shouldn't that have to go to a standing committee before it comes to the county board, for funding to continue to fund Hidden Valleys?
How it's usually worked in the past, like with Southwest Badger and Hidden Valleys and stuff, that there was a representative from the Parks Board, and then that Parks Board, that member would go, but then they would give their report during the Parks Commission meeting. I guess where I'm getting at is like the Joint Ambulance Committee, where we got the townspeople involved with that. Eventually that they're going to make a decision that what's how they want to go with the stuff, and then it's going to go back to the standing committee, and now the standing committee, says, well, I don't like the ambulance. Why should we be paying taxpayer dollars on this and blah, 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 this? And then towns are going to be like this. And then they're going to feel like, we aren't doing any good here because whatever we do, the county says no to. So let them have their decision making, and then that go on to the county board for the final approval on that, not just saying, hey, we want this, but now we changed it up before it went to county board. Now it just took away all what they thought. And I think maybe the trustees might have the same opinion on that too. I don't know. That's why I'm saying that there might be that third tab that's there. I do get what you're saying on that, and I do think that might happen. I just have a feeling that that's how it's going to work out. Like the red board too. I don't know. They might have something that might go, and it's not going to be bad that it goes there, but this sure does clean up a lot of committees and a lot of other stuff, that we may cut back on a lot of things that we're doing because of this. It just might not be the fix all at this moment.
Okay. So should we just develop a hybrid of option B and C and return to this committee with that? Should we just leave it at that at this point? Not worry about trying to categorize all the 54 committees into different categories? Yep. Ms. Luck?
I mean, one thing that, were you recognizing me?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, all right. One thing I was thinking I could do that might help is I could actually, so in that spreadsheet where I went through all of our current committees, I could actually go through and figure out all those questions that I had, and really confirm which ones are active and not active, and that might help us understand how many we're really just getting rid of because they really don't exist, or things like, I mean, I could do that. That might help get everyone's minds in the right place as far as what we're currently dealing with.
Sure. I would say couple that with, let's develop the hybrid model. And along with what you just said, then where does it make sense for the rest of those outliers to funnel into the standing committees that we come to a final agreement on? Two-part process.
Right, yep.
So I think we really need to take another look at the 11-step process I laid out through the hybrid making. We need to amend that. It's basically, they need some more work, is what I'm hearing. Okay. So I don't think there's any other motions to make. The only other one I was thinking is, do we want to present anything to the county board at this month's meeting to keep them informed and give them an opportunity to provide comments before we get too far down the road here? What do folks think about that?
I think maybe after we get a hybrid model, something a little more concrete for them to look at.
I agree. I don't think that we should do something first, even though that this is a public meeting and there's gonna be rumors starting and with staff getting all worked up like they normally do. But I think maybe what could come from this committee, somehow having a press release on big decisions like these that come out so we can get everybody on the same page, like this is what we're doing, this is not set in stone, still trying to figure this out, what the best model is, and so everybody knows.
Okay.
And I'm not saying a press release like to the community, that may be okay too, but I'm talking about like a countywide email, like I'm sure Administrator Langrick has a email where he clicks all county employees and he says, hey, give an update, this is what we're doing, be aware.
Yes, and I'm sure that county employees can go through their chain of command to communicate any concerns that they have. Some county employees report to another elected official, and of course, they're going to be getting in touch with us. But I just encourage people, any county employees, to make sure you're going through your department heads and then go through your direct report if you report to Administrator Langreck. He's the funnel for a lot of this stuff. So, of course, we want to hear people's opinions, but we can't. It also has to go through the chain of command. So, and that's per county board policy. So,
Sean, may I ask a question?
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Brewer.
Are you intending to have this ready by the organizational meeting of the county board?
Well, that's a good segue. So our agenda today, I know Mr. Cosgrove's got to leave here because he's got a meeting at noon. So I was wondering if the committee would be open to, I'm going to skip down to what we usually talk about in adjournment, to scheduling an additional meeting in February so we could handle agenda items number 7 and 8. If you don't mind, if we handle 9 with you being gone, the ethics ordinance today, we've got Mr. Wendell here. But then we could discuss the hybrid model under agenda item number 6 at a meeting in maybe 2 weeks, and then we could also handle agenda items number 7 and 8 to make sure we've got enough people here. Are folks okay with meeting twice in February? Because I think yes, or my opinion at least is yes, I think we are trying to get prepared to, adopt a new way of doing things for the next term, but we're going to have to meet a little more often if we're going to accomplish that probably. Okay, so Mr. Cosgrove's good with meeting again. So how about we try in 2 weeks? What if we tried the third Thursday at 10 a.m.? We usually meet the first Thursday at 10 a.m. Veterans is in here. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
We could just meet remotely. Is that possible, or can we do? No. They use WebEx also. Okay. What if we just met a little later? What if we met right after veterans got done?
Is that the 17th?
The 17th, Thursday, February 17th. Say we met at noon. Does that 2 hours? Is that folks okay with a noon meeting? Got folks looking right now. I see head nodding.
17th at noon?
17th at noon. Okay, so when we get to agenda item number 11 today, we'll make a motion to adjourn to February 17th at noon. So let's just kind of put a pin on that. So I think we're done with agenda item number. Yep, Ms. Gentis?
Yeah, noon rather than 10?
That's right, to avoid a conflict with the Veterans Committee. Okay, so we're done with agenda item number 6, and we'll skip 7 and
Mr.
8,
Chair?
unless I hear any objection. Yep.
I'm sorry, I just realized I have a 1 o'clock executive committee meeting with Southwest Regional Planning Commission that day.
Oh, 1 o'clock that day. Okay.
Yeah, so I'd be from 12, 12 to 1.
And then does the Veterans Committee usually go 2 hours, or
Could we, it's in a range of probably 60 to 90 minutes, if memory serves.
could we try 11:30? Would that work? Well, they haven't had meetings since November either. Oh, okay. Would 11:30 be okay? Or we could try 3 o'clock, I guess, and wait for your other meeting to be done. I don't know if 3 o'clock works, and that might get into your sleep schedule.
I got 17th off.
You got the 17th off, okay.
Go later in the day too.
Well, if we did 3 o'clock, we wouldn't be rushed then.
Sometimes that meeting takes an excessively long time, but I guess I could tell them I have to leave at 3. I'd be okay with that.
That'd be great. If you don't mind.
Yeah,
Oh.
sometimes that meeting takes like 4 hours, but
Oh, wow. Yeah. Sounds like they need some time limits. Okay, so let's tentatively, let's not tentatively, let's say 3 p.m. on Thursday, February 17th. Okay, it's in Mr. Cosgrove's calendar. Okay, and we still got a quorum. He's walking out of the room, so let's go to agenda item number 9, the ethics ordinance. And I think I'm going to hand this right off to Mr. Langreck and Mr. Wendell.
Maybe strategic planning was going to meet somewhere around that week. Or was it before? Do you remember, Melissa? I said I'm on vacation next week, and so is Supervisor Cosgrove.
I think we're meeting the Monday of that week. Let me check. Yeah, we're meeting the Monday because it's before I have to go to land conservation.
The 14th, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still Thursday, February 17th at 3 p.m. Just in case anyone's confused. I keep repeating it. Okay, so agenda item, yep, Mr. Brewer.
Mr. Chairman, I, of course, can't be with you then, so, but that's all right. I'm not on this committee.
Well, we will, of course, record it. MIS will record it for us, so hopefully you can watch it afterward.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so agenda item number 9, the ethics ordinance. Let's see, should I kick it off? Let's see, it's been a few months. We've discussed the ethics ordinance a few times over the past year or so. And the last time we discussed this, I think it was 3 months ago, roughly. And we had 9 different points that we wanted incorporated into our ethics ordinance. And Mr. Wendell has drafted a revised ethics ordinance. He started from scratch, and he's got a few questions for us today. So, Mr. Wendell, do you want to just make a few remarks and then go through your questions? Does that sound okay?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'll just go through the 9 points and explain how I address them. So in the authority section, I added the appropriate statute. I also cited the year of the statute in which this ordinance is drafted under, so that if anybody should look in the future, they can look at, if there's a change to this statute in the future, they can look and see what it looked like as it was written. An additional question there. In the previous ordinance that was attached to this ordinance, my preference would be not to do that and just leave the language as it is, but I did want to present that as a potential option. Point number 2, the addition of...
Can you, do you mind if I interrupt you with
Sure.
a question? I wasn't, can you explain that again?
Sure. So in the previous ordinance,
Previous, being the current ordinance?
sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes,
Okay.
in the current ordinance, it actually refers to the statute that the authority, it claims the authority of. And it's not in the version that I have, but my understanding is that that statute is actually physically attached to the ordinance. That's,
Do you have a copy of the previous ordinance? I'm sorry, of the current ordinance. Do you have a copy of our
I
current
have,
ordinance?
0628. Let me find it.
I'm just confused about what you're saying because in our current ordinance, in the copy of it, and I'm just trying to figure out where it's at myself. What month we did this in? Is it November? Yes, it was in November. The Richland County Ethics Ordinance, it's a 3-page ordinance, ordinance number 06-28. And then there are 2 amendments underneath it, 07-7 and 10-8. So I'm confused about what you're saying about statutes and something being attached to it. I don't see any statutes attached to it from Wisconsin state statutes.
So in the 0621 or 0628, the point number 1, the authority for this ordinance is Wisconsin statute sections 19.59, 1M through 6. I'm not sure actually where I got it from at this point, but my understanding was that statute, like a printout or an explanation of that statute, was physically attached to this.
We never received a copy of that.
Okay, well, that's problem solved then. I withdraw that question then because you just answered it. Any further questions on that point? Okay. Point number 2, the addition of public officials, including county board supervisors, constitutional officers, and the county administrator is defined in Wisconsin State Statute 19.427W. I addressed that in 2 areas. The first, under the authority section, I state that the ordinance, the proposed ordinance, would use the definitions found in 19.42, which includes local officials. Local officials includes all of the entities mentioned in this point. And then I specified that local in this ordinance refers to Richland County.
So that was one of my questions when I was going over this morning. This new ordinance that you drafted, it includes Richland County employees and local officials. Is that how it's termed?
It is employees, officials, and candidates for office and their immediate family to the extent allowed by statute.
Under 4 applicability.
That's the
I see it
second
now.
place where I.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Any questions on that one? No.
By officials, you mean like constitutional officers?
Yes. So like, for example, my office was exempted from the current ordinance. The county highway commissioner, all elected officials, county board supervisors. I imagine the main point of this was to get this to apply to those. So I believe that would catch all of them.
When we were talking about this in November, we were listing out the addition of public officials, and we had 3 categories. We had county board supervisors, constitutional officers, and the county administrator. So that's how we had it listed in this summary spreadsheet from November. So would all 3 of those categories be, you just said constitutional officers, and I don't know if we are a constitutional officer or the county administrator is, but I just want to be clear that we're including everyone elected or appointed.
And their immediate families.
And their immediate families. Okay.
I can write in exceptions if there's a specific office you'd like exempted, but my understanding was you wanted everybody.
I don't think we wanted anyone exempted. That was the problem with our with our current ordinance.
Point 4, the addition of candidates. That is under the applicability section as well. 4A, all local public officials, candidates for public office. So that's where that comes in. And then once all of that is defined, the last part of section A of point 4 is that county officials is the term used for the future. So anywhere beyond that in the ordinance, you see county officials, it means it applies to all of the above.
So if you are a patrolman in the highway department, you are a county official.
Yes.
If you are a county board member, you're a county official.
Big C, big O, county official.
Everybody feel important then.
Well, they should. They're working for the betterment of their communities. Addition of candidates. So point 5, a requirement that public officials, county employees, county officials file a statement of economic interest, which brings me to my first 2 questions. I'll start with the easy one. Was there an intention as to when those statements of economic interest should be filed? Should those be at different times for different categories? So for example, a candidate for public office could be required to file their statement of economic interest alongside their ballot application or those materials. That may be somewhat onerous because a potential candidate would have to be collecting signatures and filling out their SEI and getting their immediate family members to fill out their SEIs.
I don't think that we thought it would be onerous for candidates to have to fill it out. I think some of us have filled the form out when we've been running for different offices. I think Supervisor Luck, you mentioned you filled it out for being on, was it the Planning Commission or?
No, the Wisconsin Land and Water Association Board of
Okay.
Directors.
I
Yeah.
had to fill it out when I was running for state assembly. It's not like you just have to have it done by a certain date before.
Does it define immediate family members? Who are they?
That is, I believe, defined in the statute. Let me just double check that.
Is it just someone who lives with you, or like, do I have to hunt down my children and get them to fill it out? Even though they don't live with me?
Immediate family means an individual's spouse and an individual's relative by marriage, lineal descent, or adoption who receives directly or indirectly more than one half of his or her support from the individual or from whom the individual receives directly or indirectly more than one half of his or her support. So
Gotcha.
if you're not providing
My
half
kids are,
or
yeah,
more.
my kids are independent, so I wouldn't, so it'd just be my husband. Got it.
Does this apply to like every county employee, let's say, because we're not an official thing? So a patrolman, would he have to fill out a financial statement?
As written, yes.
I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, and when we were talking about this in November, I think we were mostly thinking about the candidates for public office, that they would have to disclose what their economic interests were themselves and with their immediate family. I know I wasn't thinking about county employees at the time with that particular option. I can see why you wrote it like you did because you're trying to define who all the ordinance applies to, but I wonder if we might need an exception for county. Do we want all 600 people who have a W-2 at the county to fill out a statement of economic interest? Or do we want it just to apply to people running for office?
I would say just for the county board part of the office, just because we control 30 million that we get, county board does. And so I think that would be, which could show potential influence, because I know that's how campaign finance stuff works, because you can see who potentially influences a vote. That's what the whole point of it is. So say if somebody gave me, supports me financially with, $100,000, but they have a stake in how the county is, or they provide a service to the county. Now I have a say on the vote to try to convince other supervisors to say, hey, just give them a little bit more money over here because they're benefiting me in the office. I think that's what we need to do, not like the employee, not like the constitutional officer who doesn't have really control over that. No, it's the county board.
I agree.
So for the filing of economic, what's the terms?
Statement of economic interest.
Statement of economic interest. I think we're thinking it should just apply to county board members and their immediate family.
Okay.
And we're not talking about other constitutional officers.
So the directive I received was a requirement that public officials, county employees, and/or candidates for public office be required to file a statement of economic interest. You want that changed to the county board supervisors and candidates, therefore.
Yes, you're right. So you're right. So in November, we did pass a large motion that had 9 points in it. And one of those points did say a requirement that public officials, county employees, and/or candidates for public office be required to file a statement of economic interest.
I don't think we really had a specific discussion about it though. And I think asking a part-time employee at Simon's to fill out an economic interest and who's looking at all these documents? Think of the work of 600 and some. So that makes no sense to me. So I think, at the time we were just sort of looking at big picture, and now that we're into the details, I think it doesn't, I agree with the change that you've suggested.
Okay, so, and I'm looking at number 5 on that previous cover sheet right now. So I just want to be real clear with you, since we changed our mind, or we didn't catch that when we were first doing this. A requirement that county board members and/or candidates for county board be required to file a statement of economic interest. Is that how we wanted to apply?
Can you repeat that again?
A requirement that county board members and candidates for county board be required to file a statement of economic interest.
And their immediate family, right?
Yeah, that was under, and now I'm a little, and I think their immediate family too.
So there is a term in the definition section of the state statute that's called elective office. An elective office is an office regularly filled by vote of the people. If the intent is to see potential influences, any elective official or candidate for an elective position should file an SEI. So for example, the sheriff.
Yeah, and I'm just going back again to what we were going off of back in November. Statute 19.59 allows the ordinance to apply to members of the immediate family of individuals who hold positions. So, and I guess, part of me kind of thinks it's the people who, I'm just thinking the people who are elected. I mean, I don't know. Should we just single out county board members, and should it not include the constitutional officers? That might get a little, because we have more in control of the budget. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the county board's got more control of the budget. I guess, let's look at the coroner, for example. Coroner cannot be a licensed or have his own business, work for a funeral home. You got to separate that. That's not good. But they could be a deputy. They can't be the actual coroner itself. So what I'm kind of getting at is, like, if dealing with the death, like if coroner's got some financial interest in funeral home, and he may sway that most of those burial or most of those bodies need to be referred to this one funeral home so that funeral home can get more money. That's a way of like knowing like, hey, he can't do that because of financial thing. That's how we're gonna know, like, oh, got financial interest in this particular funeral home.
So that seems to be a good example where you would want the coroner to fill out the statement of economic interest too. You're kind of
Maybe.
arguing that.
Maybe.
way.
I know that there was a deputy coroner in the past who's had family that was part owner of a funeral home,
Well, I'm just thinking too, like,
but they never, I'm not saying or accusing them of not doing that. I'm just saying that potential could exist at some point in time, could influence stuff like
yeah, and I think state law just talks about the reason why we have the possibility of doing an ethics ordinance is for transparency and to make sure that the public knows that we are operating in their best interest. So yeah, no one's being accused of anything, but I think it's for the public so that they can look at what our financial interests are if someone's running for elected office or if they're in elected office, because we appoint some people obviously, and they're not always elected by the people.
that. Yeah.
They're elected by their representatives or
Yeah.
appointed by them. So maybe if the only cutoff was budget, because we set the county budget, also like the treasurer collects millions of dollars, so I can see why you would want maybe all the constitutional and elected officials and their families to fill out the statement of economic interest since,
But is the treasurer allowed to cut a check from the county without having a resolution from the county board?
yes, aren't they?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, we don't go, I'm sure they do.
I thought every dollar's got to be spent in the county's got to have county board approval.
They don't go through the county. Oh. I don't know. Sure. But I think the question, we just need to be real clear with Mr. Wendell. Do we want county board members and other constitutional officers to have to fill this out along with their families or not? We need to be real clear about that. I'm comfortable with asking our constitutional officers to do it. I don't think, I filled one of these out and it wasn't that hard to fill out. It was a pretty simple thing to do. And if we have 21 of us plus 6 constitutional officers, and they're all filling it out, I mean, that's like 30 pieces of paper, and you can report your spouse's economic interest on the same form as yours. You don't need to have the spouse do it separately, if I remember right. So we're talking about 30 pieces of paper being on file at any given point, roughly.
I just
Mr.
don't
Chair?
want the employee. That's their personal.
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I think constitutional officers should be included. I mean, I think this is for transparency. I think any elected official, we want to be as transparent as possible. I will just mention that my spouse did not have to fill out an economic interest form. Only I do for the board of directors that I serve on. So just FYI.
Okay. I could be, maybe we just need to look into that a little bit more. I don't thought I had to, but could be different for different bodies. So do we want to include members of the immediate family? Mr. Severson saying no.
I mean, I could see that potentially being an area where the families may not like being dragged into it, kind of thing. I don't know.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Derek will just roll his eyes at me probably, but I mean, I think it's most important that we do it. But I do think if someone was going to be doing something bad, they could try to funnel it through their spouse. So if you want to be truly transparent, it probably makes sense if it's someone that you're, financially tied to, like a spouse. That maybe it makes sense. I can see why it happens. I was just saying that they didn't make me do that for the board of directors that I'm on.
Yeah, I personally don't have any problem with it, including that. I think if, someone's going to hold public office and be dealing with millions of dollars worth of money and contracts, and I think we should be able to know if they're getting support from a spouse, and it's coming from certain places. I think the public deserves to know that.
You just mentioned the word contracts. I guess I kind of agree now. Because, you look at Health and Human Services, there's a lot of contracts with different individuals who may have another business that, I get it. I could see that, yeah. I'll be for that.
Okay, so I think we're all okay with immediate family of county board supervisors and constitutional officers and any candidates for public office. Now, we haven't answered your question about the date that this should be required.
Well, that
Ryan?
simplifies it now if we're
Does
not
it?
dealing with employees anymore. So just pick one.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of maybe trust that to you to try
Okay.
to fill it in. But obviously, if someone's running for one of these offices and if the clerk can remove them from the ballot, like is later on down
Mhm.
here, they would have to have it filled out before their deadline to get on the ballot.
What I'll do is I'll contact Clerk Kalish after this, figure out a time that would work for him to be feasible to review these prior to either the issuance of the ballot or with enough time for him to retrieve the ballots, and we can decide on a date.
Okay, great. Okay, carry on. Now that we finally made a decision there, thanks for your patience.
Of course. All right. Speaking of, a provision directing that the county clerk to omit the name of any candidate from election ballot who fails to disclose their economic interests. That is directly after the question about the date. The county clerk is directed to omit from any ballot any county official who fails to file their SEI. County official will be changed to exclude employees, but that is in there now. And then the treasurer is directly below that with directed to withhold payment of salary or expenses for anyone who hasn't turned in their SEI. Going back up to the one that kind of stumped me, is changing the definition of a substantial gift from $100 to a different amount.
Yeah, we chose $50 at the November meeting. That
Okay.
should be in the minutes. Pretty sure I remember that discussion.
Yeah.
We were talking about 25, and then we talked about we might need to up that because sometimes you go to a conference and you need to eat the meals that they give you or something like that. So $50 was the amount we decided on.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, of course.
I remember doing with that $50. Maybe it could be $100. I don't know.
It is currently 100.
It is currently 100.
Yes, and so our discussion was about lowering it from 100 to 25 because the counties association had $25 listed. So we debated it and raised it to 50.
So substantial value is anything over $50.
That's what we defined it as. Yeah. We basically halved it, the current ordinance.
That's much simpler than my proposed language.
Okay.
The violation of an ordinance does not require the removal of public officials or employees from their position. That doesn't need to be spelled out specifically. The ethics board makes the decision as to what the remedy to a violation of this ordinance is. So there is no requirement anywhere. So there doesn't need to be an exception to requirement that doesn't exist spelled out.
And that was only in our list because state statute said you can't require the removal of someone for violating ethics. You can't do it just because of that.
Okay.
There's another process for removing elected officials, and you can't tie it just to the ethics violation. I don't think you have to have any reason. It's just a vote of the county board or the governor, or whatever it is, or the electors, or there's a whole other process separate from the ethics.
Chapter 17 of the state
Yes.
statutes.
Yeah.
So I can insert a reference to that in here if you'd like. It just, for me, it doesn't need to be said. But I'm also a lawyer, so I look at these statutes all the time. So, all right, so that resolves that part. In terms of the practical application of it, this ordinance, were it passed, would repeal the existing ordinance in its entirety, including all amendments, and in the rules of the board ordinance, where it's also referenced. So we'd be starting with a clean slate. Number 3 on my proposed ordinance, you have a couple of options here. The way it's written currently, the current committee members would serve out the remainder of their term per the existing ordinance. And then they would be reappointed with whatever appointment procedure the board decides on. The alternative would be to eliminate the currently existing committee in its entirety and then have the immediate reappointment.
Well, I don't think we know what's going to happen with our, with this committee at this point, based on our previous agenda item.
And
So we might need to skip that for now and until we figure that other stuff out, I'm guessing. I don't know that it will be called the Rules and Resolutions Committee and Ethics Board.
those could be split out. The executive committee could function as the ethics board. That would be, it seems.
It could,
See,
but
now
we
that's
don't
something that
know.
we would have to discuss when we
Right.
have that.
So that's why I'm suggesting skip it now.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
Okay. The rest of it is pretty much unchanged. The enforcement of the code is by a written complaint filed with the clerk. There will need to, if it doesn't exist already, draft a complaint form. It's not a requirement, but it was in the last ordinance that directed the clerk to do this. If we don't want to do that, I can take that out. It's not a requirement anywhere, but.
Sorry, I just had a thought backing up one. Can you craft the language in regards to the ethics board? Can it be crafted with language saying like be carried out by the committee assigned with carrying or with performing the ethics board duties, then at a later date, then assigning that underneath the committee structure language? Is that?
I could state that at the organizational meeting of the board will elect a committee to serve as the ethics board, or I guess part of the question is going to be, do you want the ethics board to be part of the rules and resolutions committee still? Do you want it to be a standalone function?
I think I'm making things more complicated.
Well, I understand where you're going with it. If we end up with six standing committees, which we don't know, but if we do, you could give the ethics board responsibility to one of those standing committees. And what he's saying is just don't put it in the ordinance.
Mhm.
Just say that the ethics board responsibilities will be assigned to a committee of the board, and then that happens through the committee structure document. You put it under one of those standing committees as their responsibilities. And then that way you don't have to write specifically the standing committee name, because the standing committee name might change every 2 years with, the next county board might be like, oh, that was a terrible way of doing things and we're not naming it that anymore, so.
So it's something more along the lines of there shall be a committee of the board, then blank out the rest of that.
Yeah,
Which shall operate in the following manner.
Yeah, we just kind of need to skip the name for now, I think.
And then something else, this, I believe the intention is to pass it as a standalone ordinance, but this could also be incorporated into the new committee structure document if and when that is passed.
Other county boards have done that. They have their rules of the county board, their committee structure document, and their ethics all in one. I noticed that when I was doing research.
And there are pros and cons to that. But yes, that is a potential solution to this. Then in terms of concrete things that I still have questions on, in the complaint process, it was changed whether or not a complainant needs to identify themselves on the complaint. It's not something I felt comfortable deciding for the committee, and so I was hoping to get some direction on that. Obviously, the option of an anonymity may encourage people to complain who otherwise wouldn't, so that would, but that's paradoxically not a very transparent process then, because you risk less than truthful accusations, people hiding behind the shield of anonymity.
Current ordinance does not allow anonymous complaints.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
I-
that was
that was
an
changed. It was
amendment
an
from
amendment.
the first part.
And there's the fear of retribution. Somebody did.
I'm fine with anonymous complaints not being made for this particular ordinance. I mean, I understand why you might need anonymous complaints in other situations, but this is accusing someone of taking money and influencing their actions as a county official. So if someone's gonna accuse someone of that, aren't you gonna have to know who that is in order to investigate the complaint, is my thinking, like,
Does make it a whole lot harder if you don't know who you're getting your information from, unless they're turning over all of the supporting documents and evidence.
I'm comfortable with it not being anonymous. That's our current ordinance. You have to submit your name if you're gonna complain. But I understand some people are fearful, but I don't know. How do you feel about it, Supervisor-elect?
I can see both points. But again, this is I do agree that it is a very serious, this would be a very serious accusation. So if we weren't going to require the name, we would have to require substantial, evidence. So I think we can leave the name in there.
And at some point, the name is going to have to come out because this is close enough to a due process proceeding that the Sixth Amendment may kick in and you have the right to face your accuser.
Okay.
So if we're comfortable including the name, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, great. I think there's general agreement there.
And then just under the penalty section, I'm just seeing this, but in the first line, penalties for violation of the code include, I'm going to add, but are not limited to, that will catch the potential for removal or other remedies that the board may issue. Other than that, the process pretty much remained the same from the existing ordinance, barring some formatting changes, readability, and it being one single ordinance instead of an ordinance and two amendments.
Okay, well, I just want to first say thanks for working on this. Under applicability, the fourth section, sorry, no. It's the section on, it's section 5, Code of Ethics. Code of Ethics essentially is setting a dollar amount that you can't accept gifts for as a county official, and then filing the statement of economic interest for people in some sort of elected or appointed office. I feel like it's too light there. It's like when we
also all of section 19.591. So all of these provisions,
they're already in state statute,
yeah.
right? Yeah, so it's just kind of restating state statute, except for the part where we're requiring people to fill out a statement of economic interest. That's optional in state statute. And what I guess I'm saying is, I know I was looking at those other ordinances this morning when I was thinking about this, and the ordinances, I was just reading Crawford counties. So this is, if you go back to our November folders or the November meeting on the website, this would be attachment D as in dog. So 7D. Crawford County has like just a little, I'm sorry, gather my thoughts here. There's a section within the ordinance and it defines what actually the ethics ordinance applies to, and it's just not taking money. It calls them conflicts of interest, and they go into a little bit more detail, and I feel like our ethics ordinance, the reason why maybe we need a little more definition is because I think I had a question one time about, is this or that ethical for me to do? And so I went to the ethics ordinance and I saw it didn't apply to me because it just applied to county employees. But it would be nice, I think, if there's a little more guidance in there about when you might be violating ethics, or like what some of the boundaries or parameters are on this. So like receipt of gifts, I know that's one thing, but they have a section in Crawford County called business interests. And this isn't, directly tied to what you've done. I'm just kind of bringing it up more for the other two today. Their employment, like whether an official or an employee has private employment, and if that can conflict with their Richland County jobs, and then representing private interests before county agencies and courts, and then contracting. And I think the contracting one is probably the one that applies to some people at the county because, it's a small town, and they have a preamble to all this in the Crawford County one, that talks about how Crawford County officials and employees should be independent, impartial, and responsible to the people. Their offices should not be used for personal gain. Their business should be conducted in a way so as to reinforce the public's confidence in its integrity. And I think when I went through these ethics ordinances from different counties, several of them had this language. It wasn't like totally unique. And I just wonder if we might need some language in there, just kind of explaining what ethics is and kind of the parameters that we want our ordinance to apply, so that we give a little more guidance to us and future people who are serving the county.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that just referring to statutes is not as effective because I don't know how many people actually go and then read. And they should. We all should look at those statutes in detail. But if we just pull out some of the examples and highlights, I think that would be helpful in making sure people really understand what is and is not okay. If Carrie's talking, I can't hear him.
No, he's not. You just give me a very slight head nod, so I was just going to see if you want to say anything.
So
yeah, go ahead.
would this be guidance relative to the potential statutory consequences? So for example, it's potentially a felony offense if a supervisor were to act in their or make a decision on something that influences their own personal economic status, or is it more of a statement of shared values, which I would want then some direction on, because if I'm not citing the statutes, I'm kind of in the weeds.
Yeah, no, I think it's the latter. It's not.
Okay.
It's not the former that we're talking about. The penalties are already set in that one section, and what I'm pulling from the Crawford County Code of Ethics, and I'll send this document to you. Has a section called Declaration of Policy. What's the purpose of it? And then it has a section on the responsibility of public office, public officials, and employees. It just has some good language in there. It just gives you the background, the context.
I like the definition section where it defines what anything of value means and what financial interest is. And so I think maybe we just need a added section, like you said, with these definitions, and also, a more broad responsibility of public office and purpose statements.
And then if you're looking at the document, it's 4.63 conflicts of interest at the bottom of page 2. That's where I was pulling out getting into some more specifics about you can't receive gifts. Those are prohibited. And that, of course, defines what's a thing of value, which we've already done. But then it has business interests, employment, contracting. It has those specific things. And
Yep.
so I guess what I'm wondering is, can you, Mr. Wendell, read through the Crawford County ethics ordinance, and can you pull some of those? Can you just look at some of those sections, and you might have some questions to follow up with us on, like, well, do you want this in there? Do you want that in there? But if you could just figure out how to pull some of those things in, because when I read through your ordinance that you drafted, I thought that's pretty, I'm like, wait, what is ethics? I almost like kind of forgot, because it was more about the penalty and who it applied to and the statement of economic interest. And I think we just need a little more context now. And I think we had some in our old ordinance, but I don't think it was very good. We definitely needed to refresh this.
So don't be surprised if that language happens to look very similar to the Crawford ordinance.
They copied from other people. I think it's good. I mean, but we have to have a chance to all read it too,
Right.
But that's why I'm wondering if you can just pull it back in. Are you okay with that, Mr. Severson? Okay. Ms. Locke, you're okay? Okay.
Could
great.
somebody forward that to me?
I will send it to you.
Okay.
Yep, for sure.
I'm sure it's on their website, but
Yeah.
I just want to make
Nope,
sure I'm
I'll-
looking at what you are.
I'll send it to you after the meeting. Okay, so I don't think we need to take any formal action on that today. Okay. Have to go back to the year 2022. Folders. Back to today's agenda. Agenda item number 10, future agenda items. So Mr. Severson, do you have any? Okay, Ms. Luck?
No, I think we got our hands full.
Yeah, don't we? Okay, so agenda item number 11, adjournment. So looking for a motion to adjourn to Thursday, February 17th at 3 p.m.
So moved.
I will second.
Okay, motion by Luck, second by Severson. We're adjourned. Bye.